real quickly before we get to the Bible, LCMS hymnals. We had talked about this last week, and how many hymnals have some of you had in your lifetimes? I'm going to guess most of you have been with TLH, LW, and LSB, probably. But if you go back to the Lutheran Church of Missouri Synod, we've had 5 hymn books in our history. The Kirchengesangbuch in 1847 was a little book. Does anybody have a copy of that? If you have a copy of that, I'd die for it. I'll go on Amazon and try to get one. But do you know if there's one floating around anywhere here in the church? Okay.
It's all in German.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Kirchengesangbuch. It's all in German. And it was about this size. This is a current German hymnal. And this is what German hymnals look like. They're little kind of pocket size, very small. And it would have been like this. However, it was different and it had no musical notations. It was only the lyrics. Right? You remember that, Robert?
Yeah, barely.
Oh, really? He's older than I thought he was. Okay.
I just remember seeing the book. But
Really? You've seen the book? Okay. So it had no music in it, which is kind of fascinating. And I actually printed out a little history here, if you just real quickly, if you'd indulge me on this. So you had Walther coming over and the Saxon immigrants in 1847 publishing this book, which was actually the same year as the Synod was founded. The Synod was founded in 1847, and I like to trick people on this one to find out how much you know. What city was the Lutheran Church of Missouri Synod founded in?
Fort Wayne.
Come on, somebody say St. Louis.
yeah,
It's Chicago, Illinois. Chicago, Illinois.
I thought it was Fort Wayne.
Yeah, Chicago, Illinois.
Well, they met there.
Yeah, they met there, you know, and actually Chicago, Illinois is where it started, which is kind of strange because you'd think it'd be called the Illinois Synod. Right, rather than the Missouri Synod. Yeah. It's kind of interesting. Walther put this together with the others, and it served the German services. He took a leading part in this Kirchengesangbuch für evangelisch-lutherische Gemeinden unter gederter Augsburger Konfession. Appeared in 1847. The Evangelical Lutheran Congregations under the Augsburg Confession. That was the name of it. Great name, right? Fascinating name. And so they put that together, no music, only text, and they tried to recover the text that had been altered in so many ways. And they tried to kind of restore everything that had fallen into disuse. But they had to relearn. What they had to do then, they actually had to have practice sessions. They had choir rehearsals for the congregation because you had no music in the book. So which tune do you use? Which rhythm do you use? And I found this kind of fascinating. Congregational, there's a note here that said congregational singing had fallen into disuse in the middle of the 19th century. There wasn't much in the way of congregational singing. So Walther tried to do this, and they organized practice sessions to actually teach the congregation the old chorales. Going back, they were held weekly, Thursday evening. Why are choir rehearsals always on Thursday night? Where did that come from? Seriously. Who came up with the idea to have a choir rehearsal on Thursday night? Last Supper? Monday, Thursday? I have no idea. It's always intrigued me. I just, one of those questions I've asked, okay? Why doesn't somebody start a new trend and do it on a Tuesday night? You know? Or whatever, something like that. It's kind of interesting. But they did it back then, see? So we're just following in that tradition. Well, we've always done it that way, right? That's why we do it. Yeah, that's a good answer to everything. We've always done it that way, so don't ask a question, Pastor. And I find it very fascinating. So that's what they did. They put this together. And then the German immigrants came over here, but then you had the need for English services, okay? And the transition began with English services. There was a bunch of English hymnals that came out, but the LCMS came out with their English hymnal, which was called the Evangelical Lutheran Hymn Book, the ELHB of 1912, and I do have a copy of that. Some of you probably have a copy of this as well. Here it is, right here, buried under everything. How many of you have a copy of the Green Hymn Book of 1912? I have a copy of it right here in my hands. And so this is actually, it's the Evangelical Lutheran Hymn Book of Grace Lutheran Church, Albany, California. I stole it from that church. And it's the edition of 1930. I haven't found the 1912 edition yet. But I want to get my hands on that too, so if anybody knows of one floating around here, I'm going to have to scour our museum in there, our library. But this is the book. I had mentioned to you a few weeks ago that the hymn, Lord, Keep Us Steadfast in Thy Word. And I told you the words are right here. So how many of you, did any of you use this book? It came out in 1912. So you had this book in the LCMS for how many years? 29 years? Okay. Did anybody ever use this book up until 41? How many of you were in the church prior to 41? No? Okay. So you would have used this book, and if you had sung the hymn, it says, Lord, keep us steadfast in thy word and work, restrain the murderous Pope and Turk, who fain would tear from off thy throne Christ Jesus, thy beloved Son. Now, who wrote that hymn was Dr. Martin Luther. And so in 1912, in this 1930 edition, it would have used those words. And I have a notation in here because people don't believe me that we actually sang those words. Restrain the murderous Pope and Turk. They couldn't sing that in the ELCA.
Yeah, of course.
But there's the words right there. So I'm not making this up. You can pass it around and look at it. That's the 1912 hymn book. But that's the 1930 edition. And I don't really know precisely what happened 1912 to 1930 and what changed in that. They called this the Old Green Hymnal. Does anybody remember referring to that? People refer to hymnals by their colors. And they call them the Old Green Hymnal. And now we have a book, we have the new Sangria hymnal, or what do they call this color? Sangria, whatever it is, something like that. I'm not sure what we'll call this one. But at any rate, that's what happened. By the way, there was something else interesting in this too. That 1912 book and 1930 book actually had the harmonies of the hymns. And if you study the history of that, that was very controversial. Because Lutherans never put harmonies in their hymn books. They only had the melody, even when they included the music. They never put the harmony. And that was a big deal. It caused a lot of controversy, a lot of upset. And some of the comments were like this: we don't want to sing in parts, the Methodists do that. And remember those days where the Lutherans were all upset about that? Yeah, seriously. And so then that continued, and then we advanced to the beginning of World War II. And in World War II, the work began. It was an intersynodical committee. And so if you look at this book that was published in 1941, this is erroneously sometimes called the red hymnal. I got news for you, it's also the blue hymnal. Yeah. Because we wanted to represent Republicans and Democrats. So it's equal representation. It was red. This book is in red and blue. So people tell me the blue book, I go, which one? There was a couple of them. LW was actually blue. And red, I don't know if any of these others were red. I think that TLH was the only one in red, to my knowledge. But who published? This one I stole from Concordia College in Portland, Oregon. Who published this, who put it together, was the Evangelical Lutheran Synodical Conference. And you know who that was composed of? The WELS, Wisconsin Synod, the ELS, the Evangelical Lutheran Synod, and the LCMS. It was 3 synods that published this book and used it. Remarkable, isn't it? That if you went to a Wisconsin Synod church, how many of you were ever a Wisconsin Synod or attended Wisconsin Synod churches? You would have used this book. This is the book they used. And so this is the 1941, the Lutheran hymnal. And so there you go. You have that one. So I'll pass that around. And then fast forward to 1982, Lutheran worship came out. And Lutheran worship came out. I didn't bring the Green Dragon in here because the LBW was being published. And so this came out in 1982. Some of you remember this. This book didn't last very long. It really wasn't a very good book in a lot of ways. It was a rush job. President Preuss put it together. He asked Dr. Robert Sauer to publish this book because LCMS churches were buying up the Green Lutheran Book of Worship, which was the ELCA book. So this was kind of like a rescue book, but this was a rush job, and this book never really took off. I don't think anybody really liked it all that well. But anyways, that's what was used. This one I stole from Redeemer Lutheran Church in Chico, California. It was presented by Mr. and Mrs. C.A. Lidgett. Lidgett? If that means anything to you? And then fast forward to 2006, Lutheran Service Book came out. And Lutheran Service Book is obviously the one you have before you. So that's the history in a nutshell. I don't know if you have any questions or any comments, but I have some resources on it, but it's always interesting to me. Now let me talk about supplements real quickly and we'll go on. It is interesting that along the way we've had a couple supplements to the hymns and the hymn books. And the supplements, where'd my other one go? This one came out, oh I know, I used it to raise the projector. This was published in 1969. Do any of you remember using this, the worship supplement? This came out in 1969. This was really pushed by the ecumenical liberals in the synod. And it's got some good things in it, but it's got some things that are not so good either. You can tell the 60s was not a good time for the LCMS. How many of you were around in the 60s? It was bad times in the But LCMS was a mess in the 60s. It really was. And you know, I was kind of spared that. But this book came out, and you could tell there was this whole ecumenical push to get together with the ALC and LCA. So this little supplement came out. So we actually used that at seminary for a little while, and they got rid of it. All right, here's what I did. I took the hymnal supplement of 98. How many of you remember this one? Came out in 1998.
I got that.
So this was kind of a precursor to Lutheran Service Book, kind of just, you know, testing the waters, throwing a few things out there. I think these are like trial balloons to say, can we use some of these newer hymns? Can we use some of these newer liturgies? And this was published in 98. So again, there's some good things in here. This is actually a pretty decent little book, much better than the worship supplement of 69. So there you have the supplements. All right. Okay, any other questions, Sam? Can I take this off? That's the history. All right, so stick around. At this rate, in the year 2046, we'll have a new book, about 40 years. Okay. Actually, what I wonder about is down the road whether we will even publish books anymore. Did you hear the other day that Salt Lake City will no longer have a daily printed newspaper? The Deseret News, and what's the other one? They're going to have a weekly newspaper. Newspapers are dead. They're on their way out, essentially. Okay, they're on life support. You know, newspapers are gone. Okay, it's like I get all these. You know, we need you more than ever now with advertising revenue down. But I wonder at what point too. You know, books will be gone in the church, for example, too. So it's a big project, but we'll carry on with our books and sing God's praises and thankful for what has come before us and carry on faithfully.